Okay, so we left off with the cogito, right? That scholars usually just call it the cogito, right? Cogito ergo sum. That is Descartes' apodictic foundation for truth. I think, therefore I am. But notice, right? If this is it, right? I think, therefore I am. Then the most we can say is that when you think, you are, right? So thought exists, thought exists. And the most we can say at this point is that we are when we think, right? So this doesn't get you this doesn't get you your senses back. This doesn't get you math back. This doesn't get you your body back. This doesn't allow us to have all of those things back that Descartes said we could doubt. So how is he going to do this? How is he going to get us all our stuff back? And really the linchpin of Descartes' argument for why we can trust our senses, etc., is that he's got to prove that God is not, in fact, an evil genius, right? That God is not, the literal translation is malignant demon, right? So really Descartes starts, getting us all our stuff back with a version of the ontological argument for the existence of God. Recall that the ontological argument from Anselm is that, when we say God, we mean a being that lacks no perfection. This being can either exist in my mind or in reality. If God exists only in my mind, then he lacks a perfection. Therefore, God must exist. So it's similar to that. And it has to do with Descartes' concept of clear and distinct ideas. So let's just have a look at it. So we've got, or Descartes, his first move is going to prove that God exists and that God is not an evil genius. So for him, right, the argument for the existence of God is self-evident, right? That we have a concept of God, therefore God must exist, right? So the existence of God is contained within the idea of God, or the essence of God being an all-perfect being. So this is essentially his argument here, right? That is, what I clearly and distinctly perceive to be within the idea of a thing is true of that thing. So existence is a clear and distinct perception and a part of what it means to, of what God means, right? Existence is part of the idea of God, right? Therefore, God exists, right? So that is, how can we make this clear? If I had, let's see, if I define something, right, those aspects that are part of what makes a thing what it is, right? If those things are there, then the thing is there, right? So let's go back to triangles maybe here, right? That all angles of a triangle must equal what? So keep in mind with this that Descartes invented analytic geometry. So when you think about a triangle, part of what it means to be a triangle is all the inner angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees, right? When you think triangle, that's part of what it means to be a triangle, right? So this is how he approaches his ontological argument, right? That inner angles adding up to 180 is necessarily a part of what it means to be a triangle, right? Therefore, existence is a part of what it means to be God. Not to be God, in our understanding of what God is, right? So for that reason, right, that its existence is inherent in God is a necessary aspect of the idea, the concept of God, right? God exists. Okay, so his first step is to say, okay, God exists by definition, essentially. It's an ontological argument. Part of what it means to be God is to exist. Okay, so now how do we move from there to getting our body back, being able to trust our senses, being able to trust math, right? he says, okay, if God exists, which he thinks he's proven, then clear and distinct ideas are true, right? Because God is not going to put ideas into your head that are false. God is not an evil genius, right? Because that would be outside of the purview of what it means to be God, right? So if we can trust that God exists, we can trust our clear and distinct ideas. If God exists, then clear and distinct ideas are true. God exists, therefore, clear and distinct ideas are true. Now you can just read that. I don't have to recite it for you. Okay, so how do we go from there to getting our bodies back, right? And so he's going to actually argue that there are two types of stuff out there in the universe, two types of material. Well, that's not right. Not two types of material. Think of it as two types of we'll just call it stuff, right? He's got mental stuff, but how do we prove the physical stuff, right? How do we prove that that there are two distinct kinds of things in the universe, right? Because he's proven the mental stuff, right? He's shown us that that fundamentally there is thinking, there is mental stuff, right? So now he's got to argue that that mental stuff is different from physical stuff. He has three arguments in favor of this position, that there are two types of stuff. The first argument he makes is the argument from privacy. And in this argument he says, okay, physical stuff, right? Anything physical, I can show somebody else, right? I can make it public, right? So even something like my lungs, right? In theory, I could pull out a lung and show you a lung, right? So that's a physical thing. But the mind, no matter how many secrets I tell you, right? No matter how many thoughts I express, right? My thoughts are never publicly available. My thoughts are always private. They're always my own. So, since mental stuff is not publicly available, right? That being publicly available is a part of what it means to be physical. That must mean that the mind, or the mental stuff, is different, a different kind of stuff than physical stuff, right? And the second argument he makes from the essence of self is that the second argument from the essence of self is, this is going to look at whether or not the mind and the body can be the same thing. Keep in mind, this is the assertion he's making, that they're separate things. So if the mind and the body are identical, then all of the properties about one would be the same as the properties in the other, right? So this is not like identical twins, right, where they look the same, but there are some differences. Here, if things are identical, then they are the same in every way, right? Anything I can say about the one thing, I can say about the other thing, right? So from the essence of self, he says, okay, I can doubt my body, right? That's a property of the physical self, is that I can doubt it. But my mental self, my mind, as he proved in the cogito, is indubitable, right? I cannot doubt it. So they must be distinct things, because there's a property of one that is not attributable to the other. Okay? And the last, from indivisibility, he's going to argue that anything that's physical can be cut, essentially, right? Anything that's physical, I can break into its constituent parts. So, anything, right? Like a window, I can break it into smaller parts, smaller pieces. I can cut it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But the mind, even though we sometimes talk about, being of two minds or something like that, the mind is always accessed as an entire thing. It is one thing. You have one mind that you access all at once. You cannot simply access a part of your mind at a time. You have to have the whole thing. Your mind cannot be divided, right? And so, and this is in later meditations, like Meditation 6, where he's going to argue that there is a distinction between the physical stuff, the body, and the mental stuff, the mind. And he does this through these three arguments. Now, these aren't necessarily the names of the arguments that everybody uses across Descartes scholarship, but they get to the point. So how does this help Descartes achieve his overall goal? Recall way back, right? His overall goal is to end the conflict between science and religion that is an outgrowth of the paradigm shift, right? That there's, conflict between the two. Science says it's only empirical data. That's what's true. Religion says no, empirical data is not what's fundamentally true. What's fundamentally true is stuff that you can't see, right? The unseen is what's true. That's where we can find truth. So the way Descartes attempts to end this conflict is through his Cartesian dualism, right? He proves there's two kinds of stuff in the universe, and he basically sets out to argue that science and religion simply have different areas under their purview, right? So he says, religion, you can have the unseen stuff. You can have the mind, right? So you dominate that. And then science, you got my body, right? So you guys don't have to fight. There's two types of stuff, and you guys can give us knowledge about your particular area. Science, you get the physical. Religion, you get the mental.